Hello and welcome to another episode of the Anti-Agency Podcast, Stories of Doing Business Differently. I'm excited for our guest this week. Her name is Tai Goodwin, and she is from That Marketing Team. Tai, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jason, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. Let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I am a digital marketer and teacher at heart. I'm the CEO of, like you said, That Marketing Team, and I'm also the creator of the Liberated CEO. And who would have thought 20 plus years ago that I would be doing marketing? I started off as a
Mhm.
school teacher, if you
Oh,
can
wow.
believe that. So
Mhm.
I've made a really big pivot in careers over that 20 plus year period. And what we do now, as a marketing agency is we are the machine behind the message of companies and brands that are transforming lives and changing the world. And we love every single minute of it.
Awesome. I thought I wanted to be a teacher. So in between my marketing career, because I coached girls volleyball and I was a really great coach. And I'm like, oh, I should be a teacher. And I got my master's degree. And then I went into the classroom and I was like, whoa, this isn't like coaching sports. That was a little bit of a misstep. And then I dove back into marketing. So I can certainly relate to teaching a little bit. So that I love hearing that. But so you had mentioned prior to getting on here, you've been doing your own thing for 5 years.
hmm
What, when you think about your journey as an entrepreneur, what are a few things that kind of stand out more than anything that have really huge learnings for you, or just big things that have really helped you kind of ascend as a business owner?
Well, yeah, I mean, the first one was failing like hard.
Hmm.
So
I
this
love it.
is, 5 years in this iteration of my business, but I was actually an entrepreneur for about 4 years before. I had a full-time job and I had a side hustle. And I like to say that I was Facebook rich and profit poor. I
Hmm.
had a whole bunch of people who love me on Facebook. Oh, you're so inspirational. We share your stuff, but I had no real buyers consistently. And so I ended up going back to a day job. And I learned a lot about, first of all, my resilience, right? I
Hmm.
also learned that, I do not want to be in corporate America, but I also learned that I needed to learn how to market. Right. Because
Hmm.
that was something that nobody teaches you that. I've got these skills and it seems like this should be in demand. So I'm just going to put it out there and get clients. No, you got to learn how to market. You have to learn how to sell. And
Yeah.
so that was like real big takeaways from that. Something else I had to really learn, or that's been a really big pivot for me, is about I don't want to sell people something that's not true. Right.
Yeah.
In this day and age, we see all kinds of people telling marketing stories about six figures in 6 minutes. And I'm exaggerating just
Hmm.
a little bit.
Sure.
And I never wanted to be one of those people. So um, it's really important to me that I practice what I teach.
Hmm.
So a lot of the things in our coaching side of the business are things that I have actually done, or I've actually like really, really studied. It's never I watched a YouTube video and now I'm going to show you how to do it. Right? That's a huge part. I think what makes us authentic, like which makes us authentic, and which
Hmm.
makes people really feel like they can trust us, so that our clients keep coming back and working with us for years.
Got it. There's two things that you said that really land with me. The two words I use all the time. For first is embracing failure, right? I always say fail forward, right? It's
hmm
okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail, but learn from them. Don't make the same mistakes. So I love that, and I live and breathe that every day. And then the other one, which I use all the time, is authenticity. So I think we're kindred spirits in that regard. I'm very much of the same mindset around. There's a lot of misinformation and that's the thing about marketing, right? If I could go back and do something different, I probably wouldn't be a marketer, because so many people are just like, oh, I'll be a marketer, like, and they just snap their fingers and like and so we like with social media, like we always try to dig deeper than vanity metrics, right?
hmm
Because anybody can get you some Facebook likes or Instagram followers. It's the real results, right? It's the
Yeah.
things that actually matter to a business that stand the test of time. So I really resonate with those two things. I'm curious about you. I know your path sounded like it kind of went a little bit in and out, but did you always feel like throughout your life that you kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit flowing through you, like you were just kind of wired to be your own boss, do your own thing, and kind of felt like a square peg in a round hole when you were working for others?
Mm.
Or did you just or were there other reasons for you to kind of
Yeah.
pursue that path?
Well, I've always felt like a square peg in a round hole. So
Yeah.
whether that was your business or not. But no, like I thought I was going to be, I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. I wanted to be a
Hmm.
teacher. Like I really, really um, never ever saw myself as an entrepreneur. But then I had my daughter and I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be home with her. And so this was way back. My very first business, I was the savvy VA. This was when
Mm-hmm.
virtual assistants was like just getting like to become popular. And I did it because I wanted to stay home with my kid. And once I started realizing, and it was like how far away this was, how far ago this was, I was using like Dreamweaver,
Hmm.
and all that
I
kind of stuff
remember
to
it.
make websites
Yeah.
and desktop publishing platforms. I mean, but I loved every minute of that, like doing those kinds of projects. But when it
Hmm.
comes to corporate, I wanted to climb the corporate ladder. I worked for a couple of Fortune 500 companies. I worked for a tech startup, but there was always a limitation. I was always boxed into what somebody said, this is what your role is. So I never really
Hmm.
felt like I got to do the best parts of what I like doing because it was just, it has to fit this role. And I also didn't like, same reason I didn't like teaching so much is I didn't like that I was bound by somebody else's schedule. As a teacher, you know this, you don't get to go to the bathroom when you
Hmm.
want to, right? You
Yeah.
can't just take off a day.
Right.
And even in corporate, it was that same thing. You only have 2 weeks of vacation. I didn't really like that. And so when you start putting all those things together, it just made perfect sense. And then to come to find out, Jason, here's what's interesting.
Yeah.
I learned later that my father's side of the family is very entrepreneurial. Right?
Mm.
I've got two uncles right now that have stores, and one has a appliance store, and the other one has a home remodeling business that he does very well. And then I've got my grandfather who actually owned a store. I never knew that side of me, so it is in my blood. I just didn't know it.
Hmm. Gotcha. Tell me a little bit more about what it was like when you first started that marketing team, like the current iteration of your business. What did that transition look like? Like what sparked leaving? Was it like a general, like, what was it, a gradual transition, or is it just like you woke up one day and like, you know what, I'm done. I'm doing my own thing. Tell me a little about how that came to be.
Well, they were trying to change my job to something I didn't want
Hmm.
to be. Right? I was going from like this technical training manager, and they were trying to make some changes in downsizing, and they wanted me to become like a marketing educator. I'm like, yeah, I'm not putting that on my resume.
Yeah.
And I decided to leave. And this was the first time in my adult life I did not have a backup plan because while I was at the last company I could not have a business on the side. I
Hmm.
didn't have a resume. I didn't have any job interviews lined up. I literally walked out with my little severance package. And I remember telling my husband at the time, I said, I will eat ramen noodles every day for a year before I go back into a 9 to 5 job.
Yeah. So, did you have like your current business in motion yet, or did you just ripped off the band-aid and you're like, all right, now what? And then it just started from there.
It started from there. And that's actually how I got to start building quizzes, which is large part of our business was
Hmm.
I had a list of about 2,500 people that I had downloaded, like, because when you close out your accounts, you have to download all the names and all that stuff. Hadn't talked to those
Hmm.
people in 2.5 years.
Yeah.
I used a quiz, and within about 10 days, I had 500 people back on my email list.
Wow.
And that's how I
Okay.
started building my business. And then when I
Yeah.
wanted to, scale that or grow that, I went back to a quiz. And this time I incorporated Facebook ads. And so I had one
Hmm.
Facebook ad and one quiz. And I was able to grow my email list to about but actually by 9,000 subscribers. I went from 1,700 people on my list to about
Hmm.
12,000 people on my list in about 4 months.
Wow.
And I
That's
never
awesome.
had to wonder where my next client was coming from because I had a system that was going to bring me leads every single month.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
What obviously it's a little scary when you make that leap regardless of how prepared you are for it. How long did it take you, like, obviously, how long did it take you to kind of get to a point where it became bigger than you, right? I think that's always like a transition, right? It's like when I
Yeah,
started Socialistics, it
yeah.
was just me, and it didn't take long before it became bigger than me. How long was that transition for you?
It was about out kind of like about 2 years. And here's what
Mm-hmm.
happened though. My daughter was looking for a summer job. I'm like,
Mm,
you don't have to go to McDonald's. You can come work for me, right? She wants to be a video game designer. She loves that coding and that kind
yeah.
of stuff. And so she actually builds our quizzes now. She builds email
Oh,
automations.
wow.
I mean, she's building things in like Infusionsoft and Podia and, Go High Level, but she's got that skill set. So she
Yeah.
was my first employee in the
How
company.
old was she at that
She was
time?
like 17.
Okay, so a little bit older.
Hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
See, now this is interesting because I'm in a similar. So my oldest son, he works for my business in a kind of a part-time role. He's doing some school right now,
Hmm.
but it was always an interesting thing because I didn't, I grew up poor and I wanted to, I've done well for myself, but it was important to me that my kids knew the importance of hard work and earning what you get. And I didn't want, any level of success that I had reached to influence them in a negative way. So I didn't want to just like give him a job just because his dad has a business. I wanted it to be a good fit and I wanted it to be something that he wanted and he had to earn it. So, going through a lot of that. How when you had with your daughter at that time, was that an easy decision to make? Like, was it a natural interest for her? And I'm assuming that this was what, like a few years ago, so she's a little bit older now. She's still
Yeah.
working for you, and how I'm curious how that dynamic has worked out for you.
Well, yeah, it was a natural fit for her because at the time, well, and she still wants to do video game design. And so it
Mm-hmm.
was more about the programming elements of it, right?
Got it.
And it actually started off with doing some graphic design stuff because, I was using Canva and she was going in and making some amazing things for me in Canva. And that's how it started. And I said, well, what about this? Or what about this? And I kept just introducing things to her. And now,
Mm-hmm.
and she was the one who told me actually at one point, she said, Mom, you're treating me like your child, not an employee. I said, oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Right.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
we've got meetings on the books. She submits an invoice to me. Like we've got all those things like in
That's
place. Like
awesome.
it's just she's a 1099 employee because that's what she is. But
Yeah.
we start enfolding things, and so now she's taken more of a lead with before we had like a buffer where she wasn't really talking to like clients, but now she's the one that will email them if they don't give her the tech stuff.
Yeah.
So it's been great to see her progress in that and then really take a look at what's going on in the business. Like I just had a birthday like
Mm-hmm.
this like past
Happy
like last
belated
month.
birthday.
Thank you. Yeah.
Uh,
And I said, well, I turned 50, by the way. So I'm super excited about turning 50. And
Super excited.
yes,
I'm not.
yes.
I'm close.
Oh my gosh, yes, love it,
Uh,
love it, love it. And so I said, well, I'm going to give something away for $50. She said, no, you're not. Like she's like, well, that doesn't fit with your pricing model. So she's like telling me, right, about like my
mm-hmm.
pricing and high ticket offers. So it's kind of great to see her kind of evolve and develop that business sense. So it's been
Yeah.
kind of fun.
That's amazing. I love hearing that because, I'm kind of in the early stages because I always thought about kind of bringing him in on something, but it wasn't until kind of recently where it felt natural and right. And I saw, he came to me saying, he wanted the opportunity. And I think that was the most important thing to me. It's like, I just didn't want to give him a job just to give him one. I wanted
Yeah.
him to want it. And it's worked well because of that.
Mhm.
Have you experienced any challenges having your daughter work for you for the company that maybe you wouldn't otherwise come across with somebody that isn't your kid?
Um, no, I mean, I haven't had any challenges. I mean, at one point, I had her talking and working directly with my operations manager. So I was even more
Hmm.
removed, from some of
Yeah.
the things because I felt like it wasn't a challenge, but I was very aware of the fact that she needs to learn how to work with other people.
Yeah.
And so I put that buffer in place, right? Operations manager, that's the person you're going to get the assignments from. And so I've put those things in place to kind of help mitigate, some things, but there haven't been any problems.
Yeah. What if you were if it, I'm making assumptions here, but usually I think I'm pretty spot on in that those many people that listen to this are either agency owners or business owners or thinking about that sort of thing. What is some advice that you would give if somebody's in a situation where they're either doing that or they're thinking about doing that, and maybe they have a preteen or a teenager? What advice would you give to a business owner that might consider bringing in their son or daughter to work for the company in some capacity?
I think you have to really know your kid. You
Hmm.
know, I mean, you know what their work ethic is like. You
Hmm.
know how well they take instruction or not take instruction.
Yeah.
You know what their strengths and weaknesses are and their skills are. And if you have a pretty good handle on that, it's just like anyone else that you bring in, you're going to be able to assess, what they do. I mean, I'm like you. I mean, if she wasn't cutting the mustard, I'd be like, no, this isn't working.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but you get to know, like you look at their strengths, you look at what the growth potential is for them. And if it's a
Hmm.
good fit, I would say, give it a try, but set really clear boundaries, right?
Yeah.
You know, make sure that they are make sure that they have the right work ethic.
Hmm.
Even if they're your kid, you don't want somebody who's just doing it because, oh, I'll just do it. No, they've got to really care about what you
Yeah.
do. And I find that because we had the right relationship and there was the right balance of things, it was easy for her to care about what I did. But she's seen this off and on over her years. She would
Hmm.
come home, Mom, are you really working? What do you mean? Well, you're in there laughing with people on the phone. I don't think you're working. And so she's seen that development over the years. And she's also seen people be so excited about the results that we've gotten them. So she's kind of um, bought into the company at that level. So it's made it easy
Yeah.
for her to want to contribute.
That's awesome. So she must be in her low 20s now?
She's 20.
Is that
Yeah.
okay? Gotcha. So do you think that you had mentioned that she's kind of interested in it sounded like video game development? Will she continue to work with you in some capacity, or do you see it as more of a means to an end? Like it's just a journey, and this is kind of a stepping ground for her to kind of go into the next thing.
Yeah, we've talked about that. And that's totally up to her.
Yeah.
While she's going to school and while she's getting those other things. But I mean, and this is with anybody that's on my team, anybody that's worked for me, I'm always asking them, so what is it that you want to learn? One of the things I
Hmm.
hated about corporate companies is that they take so much. And they don't always really look to develop people, even though they say they do. And so I'm
Yeah.
always asking, what else is it that you want to learn that will help you? And so, like right now, I'm just signed on to be co-founder of another startup company, and she designed a logo for that.
Yeah.
So she's got these opportunities and these pockets of things that whatever skills she wants, if it's through me or if I have a connection, I can refer her. But she's got total, control over how much she stays, how long she stays. Um, from her perspective, but I also have total control over is this a skill and role that's needed.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Like it's so interesting to kind of hear your story about how that's worked out for you, just because I'm kind of in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So that's great. When you think about your business and where it's at right now, and if you look back, is there one thing that kind of stands out more than anything that you would do differently? You got your time machine, you can go back and you can change it. Like, is there one thing that stands out that you might have done differently?
Yeah, I have a lot of regret about not sticking with online course development.
Hmm. Yeah. Why is that?
I have a master's degree in instructional design for online learning. It's what I did at Barnes and Noble.
Hmm.
Brought e-learning into the company. And about 2007, I had morphed into wanting to help people build online courses. But back in
Yeah.
2007, it wasn't that popular of a topic unless you were
Hmm.
like paying like big bucks to do it. And so I got really discouraged because everybody was coaching, right? Everybody was becoming a
Yeah.
coach. I was trying to teach people, how to build things on Udemy was big at the time, right? And,
Hmm.
like all these little platforms that were out there, digital access pass, I was trying to build all this stuff on there and people were just not interested. And so I quit on it only to see that bubble and just rise like crazy,
Yeah.
years later. And so I've always regretted that I didn't stick with it, which is why I stick with quizzes now, because I feel like
Hmm.
quizzes are kind of like the new webinar. You know, um, I did my first webinar in 1999,
Oh, wow.
right? And I worked for a national sales company that we couldn't bring the folks off the floor. So I was teaching on Citrix, right? I was teaching them, classes across the country virtually. And there's still people today that are still trying to figure out how to do webinars. So look at that long arc.
Yeah.
And I feel like quizzes are the same thing because as people start to realize that the more data they get, the easier it is for them to market, they realize
Yeah.
that interactive lead generation like quizzes is going to be a game changer for their business.
Yeah, I think there's a correlation between. I say that a lot about social media. I think it's the same with when you talk about like webinar, because at its core, when you talk about webinars and quizzes, like to me that's education, right? Like there's there's always most people have a thirst or a hunger to be educated and to learn and to consume, right? That never goes away. It's
Right.
just how it's delivered is what evolves. It's the same thing with like social media, like because that term has kind of become synonymous with like Facebook and Twitter and the platforms that exist today. And I'm like, well, social media is not. It's storytelling. It's like, this has existed forever. It's just how is it delivered now? That's the only difference.
Yeah.
And usually, like when I talk about like, oh yeah, you're right, and then people, because there's a lot of people hate social media. It's kind of got like a negative connotation to it, and justifiably so for a lot of reasons. But when you kind of break it down to its core, it's the same thing like what you're talking about with webinars and quiz. It's like it's education. Like people are always going to want that. It's
Yeah.
just what's different is how it's delivered. So I can definitely relate to that. So what's the future for you? Like, what do you hope to see with your business in the next couple of years? Like, where do you want to go with it?
So we definitely want to reach the $1 million mark. Like that's like a
Yeah.
goal that we talk about every meeting. Like, we want to
Hmm.
do that. But we also you want to practice a little bit of what I would call, actually what I learned is entrepreneurial justice. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before.
Mm-mm. No.
And so, I was doing some research. I have a friend who was doing some investigative work. He works on like cases around like, racial justice and those kind of things. And we were
Yeah.
looking up some research one day, and I came across this idea of entrepreneurial justice where you can build your company and hire people that are just released from, prison or from something like that. And I look at a lot of
Mm.
women who have been
Yeah.
incarcerated, not always for the right reasons, that just
Yeah.
happens in our country, right? And I thought, how cool would it be to actually create a training program where I'm teaching them how to
Very cool.
do the social media and implement the marketing strategies that we're creating for our clients. And then now they've got a skill that they can take and they can create their own business, right? They could
Mm.
be the parent that gets to stay home with their kid because they have a
Awesome.
virtual business. So that's like my big dream, my big picture of where I would love to see things go in the next 5 years.
That's a really cool thing. I mean, just to put together like an education or some sort of resource for people that are in that situation, that's amazing. So that resonates with me because I grew up in a single mom environment. It was just my mom, myself,
Mhm.
my brother. We were poor. So I have a kinship to anytime I come across somebody like it's usually there's single dads too, but it's usually a single mom
Yeah.
taking care of their kids. And if I can give them a career and be home with their kids, like I connect with that just because of how I grew up. So
Yeah.
that's always super important to me. But that takes it like to another level. So that's so cool. I think you're certainly onto something there, and it's awesome. Our core values are very much about making the world a better place. So that's so cool. That's
Yeah.
so cool that you think about that. I hope that that comes to fruition for you.
Thank you. I'm excited about it. It gives us something to work
Yeah.
for. Otherwise, what's the point,
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, you're amazing. I really appreciate your time today. Where can people learn a little bit more about you and your business?
Yeah, well, they can always find us at thatmarketingteam.com. And
Hmm.
there's a little button on there if you like coming to say hello and you want to kind of get started with just learning about who we are. And then on all the social media platforms, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or even LinkedIn, I am Tai Goodwin, and they can find me that way. Would love to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for carving out some time today. If you're listening, check out the show notes. I'll make sure that the links to her websites and stuff is in there. But thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your story and some of the cool stuff that you're working on.
Thank you, Jason, and I'm excited about what you're putting out there in the world as well. So thanks for that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for being on the show. And for those of you listening, thank you for listening. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll catch you in the next episode of Anti Agency. Thanks for listening.